Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. This is Scott, your trusty Abacus trainer. Thanks for joining us on another Free Training Friday. You'll notice that you're muted. Just so everybody can just acknowledge for me real quick. Can everybody hear me okay? Click the little hand raise button there if you can in your GoToMeeting screen, just to let me know that you can hear me. Okay, thank you, thank you. And can everybody see my screen? I've also shared my screen out. You should be able to see the AbacusLaw program. Please use the hand raising button there as well. You should be able to see my mouse moving around. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. So all the technical stuff's out of the way. We can get down to business. So we are going to be talking about importing your form letters into AbacusLaw. So AbacusLaw, as you know, if you've been using the program for a little bit, kind of the whole, idea behind it is to make things easier on you as far as case management goes. So that obviously encompasses form generation as well, right? The less typing we can do when we're sending out those medical request forms and those client appointment letters and things like that, the better it is on us. It saves us some time and some typing, and anytime I can save typing time, I am all for it. So that's what we're going to talk about today, importing your letters into the AbacusLaw program, and then how to set those letters up so that they can be auto-populated with case data. Now, as you have questions, you'll notice, again, you're on mute. Please utilize the questions box there and type your questions out. My colleague, Anna, is on the webinar as well, and we'll be addressing those questions at the end. If we can't get to everybody's questions, don't worry. We keep a log of them, and we'll follow up via email with any question that we don't get to. So just make sure you type those into the question box. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, we're at our main menu, and on our toolbar, we have our little Forms button. This is going to take us into our Forms library, where we have the listing of all of our current letters, all of our current court forms, things like that. Notice my menu here is pretty involved. But you'll notice up on the top toolbar for your Forms library, you have these two Add buttons, okay? The one that just says Add, that's if you're adding a single letter, okay, a single form. You can click that button, and it will let you do it. If you have a bunch of letters, which is very common for our new clients, you probably have like a folder somewhere on your network or on your computer that just has a ton of letters that you guys use on a daily basis. If that's the case, you can actually select Add Many here, and it will allow you to bring in those forms in mass, okay? Whether they're general forms, like your request for info, your client appointment letters, your welcome to the firm letters, non-rep letters, things like that, or if they are actual court forms as well. So like any forms you're going to be submitting to the court system. So either way, you can do that by folder, which is a nice way to do it, or you can do just a bunch of forms in mass there as well. I'm actually just going to do a single add here. So I'll just do one little form for our training purposes. You'll notice when I click that, it opened up my Windows File Explorer window. Okay, so this is just going to open up, to one of your computer locations, and you need to navigate to where that form lives. So I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm looking for a very specific form. I'm going to bring in my medical records release form that I use all the time. So when I click that, it's now going to take me to a Add New Form to the library window, and I need to tell the system how I want to bring this letter into my program. Do I want to make a copy of the letter and move the copy in, or do I want to move the original letter into the system? Here's my pro tip to you. If space is not a major concern for you on your computer network, make a copy, okay? If you make a copy and you move the copy into the Forms library, then you always have that original kind of sitting on your network in case something goes wrong. Maybe you don't like the edits that you made to the copy. You can always fall back on that original. If you do have space concerns and you don't want to have two versions of that form on your computer or on your network, then you can just click Move, and it will actually move the original letter over into the forms library, okay? And just so you guys know, you're going to hear me say letter, you're going to hear me say forms. I'm using that term interchangeably. They're synonymous in this, this training that we're doing, okay? So either way I say it, just know they mean the same thing. So I'm actually going to click Copy, because that's my favorite way to do it, and that's usually the way I recommend people doing it. So when I click Copy here, it's going to bring me into my little properties window for this letter. And what I'm doing is I'm giving it an identifiable name. I'm giving it an identifiable ID. You can change these, you can modify them so it's something that stands out, you know, to you. But I also want to make sure that I'm nesting this letter into the appropriate location in my library so that it's easy to find and it's easy for my staff to find. So if this is just like a random general letter that doesn't really have anything to do with, you know, a specific area of practice, then I could probably just leave it set to the default, which is general for our category. But if I want to change that, I can. All you have to do is click that little arrow next to our category field, and that's going to open up our valid form category list, okay? So if this is like an ADR letter, maybe I put it under that. If it's a bankruptcy letter, I probably put it under that. So it's just, you know, kind of an easy way for you to keep things organized. If in your list you do not see a category that fits and you'd like to create a new one, just click the Add button up at the top and you can add custom categories, okay? So just make sure when you're bringing in those letters, if they are specific to a certain like genre, you probably want to make sure that you're putting it under the appropriate type, okay? And then of course you can get even more specific: jurisdiction, type of form, state that it's pertaining to if you practice in multiple states. And then you're going to come down to a little field here that says ALF file, ALF. No, that's not the fuzzy Muppet character from our childhood. That actually is an Abacus load file. And what that is the file that your form uses to house all of the field selections, okay? So if you think about this, what are we doing when we generate a form letter? We are having our system automatically put in our client's name. We're having our system automatically put in our attorney's name, our attorney's contact info, maybe the name of the case, things like that. This selection for your ALF file is what determines what fields you get to choose from when you generate or design that form. The reason I bring this up is because if you leave this blank, then the system's just going to use the basic standard default file that has the basic standard Abacus fields, okay? But if you practice a very specific type of law like personal injury, and this form that you're bringing in is specific to personal injury, then you want to make sure that you are choosing the ALF file that is specific to personal injury, okay, or estate planning, or civil litigation. Notice how when I clicked that little ALF button, it brought that window up for me, and I could choose the ALF file that's appropriate. So if this is a form that has, you know, fields in it specific to family law, I probably want to make sure I'm choosing my family ALF file, okay? But again, if you forget to do that and you just leave it blank, that's okay. You're still going to have field selections. Okay, it's just going to use the basic ones. And you can always go back and add the appropriate ALF file later, okay? If you want to add some notes and some helpful text, you know, about this letter, go ahead and do that as well. Remember, it's not always you who's going to be working with this letter. You hire a new person. It's nice to put some notes in there so the person has an idea of what this form does and how to use it. So that's kind of nice. But once you get all of these properties filled out for the letter, just go ahead and click Done, and there's your letter, okay? Notice it brought it into my general forms list, medical records release form. and I now have a preview of this letter. Now, in real time, if you're doing this for the very first time, right here where you see a field name, you're probably going to have either nothing or like John Smith, right? Because you probably have been manually typing this information out. So that actually brings us into the next step in this process, okay? And that's designing these letters so that they can be automated in our program, okay? So the way we design our letter after we import it into our program is we just click on the letter, and then we click the design button on our top toolbar. And what that's going to do, you can see here it says running word processor. That's actually going to invoke your default processor, whether it's Word, WordPerfect, whatever it may be, and it's going to open that letter in that program. So for me, it happens to be Word, so that's why it opened up my letter in Word, okay? Notice the tab that it automatically brought me to when I opened this letter in design mode. It's called Mailings. And if anybody has any experience doing mail merges in the past, this may be familiar to you, so that's good. There's a very important button on this Mailings tab that you're going to focus on when you're customizing this letter to work with the program. That is the Insert Merge Field button, if you notice where my mouse is hovering right there. This is an important button because this is our access to the list of available Abacus fields. Okay, so when you first import this letter, it probably looks something like this. Okay, it probably has our client's name, or at least the previous client that we used it on. It probably has their name written out or something like that. So what you'd want to do to customize this is remove that personal information. Just back that out, and then in its place where your cursor is, click that little button that says Insert Merge Field. That opens up your list of available fields, and you want to find the field that's appropriate. Okay, so for this example, I'd probably put in my client's first name and my client's last name. Okay, so look what we have there now. And you can space these out to make them a little bit, nicer on the eyes there. But now I have fields in place of where I've normally been manually typing my client's name. And now the system knows whenever you run this form, it's always going to put your client's first name here and your client's last name there. Okay? And you want to just maintain that same logic throughout this form. Okay? File attorney. Right? That's the name of the attorney that's associated with the case. Firm's address. Client's name again. Client's date of birth, client's social security number, okay? All of these field names, you're just going to select from your Insert Merge Field list. And we try and name these fields so that they're pretty identifiable. They should make sense for most people. If you have any issues with that, please check the reference guide, okay? We do have a list of the fields inside of your reference guide, and they should you should be able to provide some explanation there on what each one means. But you basically want to go through this letter and swap out that personal info for the field names, okay? Once you have the field names in the appropriate positions, you can save. Just click your Save button like you normally would in Word, okay, and close out. And if you click back on this letter, see how my change is now in place inside of my preview screen. So now it's just a matter of running this letter. And now this letter is usable anytime you want to use it, okay? You don't have to go back and design it anymore. It is a template that is now ready to roll. So all I have to do now, whenever it's time to fill this, is to just click on the letter, choose my matter from my matters database. Okay, obviously you have to tell the program what case you want to run this letter for. Okay, and then once you choose the matter, just select Fill Form. Okay, I'm actually going to do a different letter because I think I had an issue on that one. So if you watch here, I just choose my letter, I select my matter from the list, and then I click Fill Form. That invokes my word processor again, just like it did in design mode, okay, whether it's Word or WordPerfect. And then in theory, what should happen is where you've normally been typing all of that personal information, the system should just take the case info and automatically push it into those sections for you, okay? So let's let this run here for a second. Every form's a little bit different. It's going to depend on the length and all that good stuff. And here you go. So if we look at this here, let me just zoom in a little bit. There we go. Notice it put my client's name and address up at the top. It put the name of my matter, my file number. It even put in the greeting for my client as well. I don't have to type in, Dear Mr. Adams, Dear Miss Smith. It automatically does that as well. Okay, so the less typing, the better. I often get asked, what about my letterhead? Okay, the letterhead that you have in your form letters will stay there when you import the letter into the system. Okay, so it shouldn't change it. If you'd like to add letterhead to the letters that are already in, okay, that may not have them, all you have to do is just open that letter in design mode and just insert your letterhead like you normally would into a Word doc. So usually you're just going to open up like the header footer option in Word and just paste in, you know, your firm's image or, you know, whatever you want to put up there at the top. Okay. So I hope that was informative. One thing I will bring up, and this is another pro tip for you. Your letter is only going to fill with accurate information if the information inside of your matters is accurate, okay? Remember that Dear Mr. Adams field on our form? Well, if my client's record here doesn't have the Dear field filled in, the system isn't going to fill anything in your form, okay? Same thing with addresses, okay? If I don't have an address inside of, you know, this person's record, then it's not going to fill in the form and you're going to have to manually type it. So, you know, you're only as good as the data that you're putting into your system, so make sure you're doing that diligently. So I'm going to turn it over to Anna. I hope everybody has lots of questions for me. Anna, it's on you. Shout them out and I will answer to the best of my ability.
Thank you so much, Scott. This was great. Apparently you did an awesome job explaining everything because we don't have any questions yet. But maybe let's give our attendees a few minutes to type up some questions.
Sure, and while they're thinking about it, I'll talk about some other you know, interesting things. I'm sure somebody will have some questions eventually. Let's get back to the ALF file while everybody's thinking. Remember that little ALF file that holds, you know, all of those fields. If you ever want to see the fields that are inside of each of those ALF files, you can go up into this Documents menu, okay? And there is an option to set up ALF files, okay? That opens up your little window where you can choose. Let's do PI. PI is one that usually always has a lot of forms. So if I click open on my PI ALF file, it's going to open that for me in the ALF editor window. You can see that's working there. And I can actually see, you know, the different fields and different sections within my ALF file. So it's nice to become familiar. There you go. Let me just pull that over onto the right monitor. It's nice to become familiar with, you know, the different types of links that are going to be associated. You can see here I've got, because this is a PI ALF file, I've got potential fields for insurance companies, health insurance, adjusters, you know, different party plaintiffs, different co-defendants, things like that, witnesses. So become familiar with these ALF files. The more familiar you are with these, the better an expert you're going to become with customizing your form letters. Okay. How about now? Any questions?
Yes, I do have a few questions actually. They keep coming in now. One question is there a way to produce the same document for more than one client at one time? Or do I need to do this process for each client one at a time?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. You're basically referring to what we call mail merge, and again, this is a common thing even within a single case, I mean, you can see this, or if it's for multiple clients, you know, you can see it a lot too. But yeah, you can do one single document multiple times at the same time for different people, okay? You can do it by using your selection boxes within your browse windows, okay? So if I want to do, let's say I want to do a welcome to the firm letter or a non-rep letter for 5 different people, okay? All I have to do is go into my names browse window, find those 5 different people, and just check their names off. Okay, so you might have to do a little searching just to, you know, target them. Okay, but once you have those people selected, then what you're going to do is use the Actions button, where you'll see an option to mail merge. Okay, and when you mail merge, it opens up this little window where you can tell the system that you want to run a merge for all 5 of the records that you selected, and you can choose the form from your library that you want to use. Okay, so become familiar with you know, the names of your forms, because that's key when you're doing it this way. Okay, so that's one way to do it, and then obviously you just click done, and that will, you know, do the merge actions for you. So that's not an uncommon thing. You definitely see that in PI when, and our PI friends out there will agree to this. You know, when you have multiple doctors or multiple treating facilities on an incident, on an injury, you end up having to send, you know, your medical request information to multiple facilities and multiple doctors. So if that were the case, all you'd have to do is go into the case itself. Oh, let's find a PI case here. We'll do test v. Coke. Open up your matter here, and on this window, you have the linked names tab. And this is where you could start clicking off all those different doctors' names that are attached to the case, like Dr. 1, Dr. 2, Dr. 3. And then same rules apply. Click your Actions button, choose Mail Merge, all 6 records, or whatever, however many you chose. Choose your form, click Done. Okay. Notice you have the checkbox here that says Run Word Processor. That's going to actually run. That's selected by default, by the way. You don't have to click that. So that should take care of that for you. Okay, so hopefully that answered your question. Any more questions in the list there?
Thank you, Scott. Yes, a few more. Another question is the process of uploading a form letter any different if we're using the Abacus Private Cloud?
No, it's not. It's the exact same step. However, you just have to remember that the documents need to be in your cloud environment. Okay, so you can, you know, I'm sure that you have probably a bunch of folders on your local network. You make sure that you you know, just right-click on that folder that has them all, select copy, and then paste them into, you know, some sort of shared area of your private cloud. Probably on like your X drive or your Z drive. I would probably recommend the X drive for the Abacus Private Cloud users. That tends to be the one with the most space. So if you just copy those forms over to your X drive, then the steps are the same. You just go right into your forms library in your private cloud, click the Add button, okay, and then you can just go right to that X drive and, you know, select your letters.
Great. Let's move on to the next question. Can you make the list of form category folders alphabetical?
That's a great question. I don't think I've ever tried that. I don't think that there is a setting that does that. Let me test that out, and I will get back to you. Anna, if you could please just make note of that person's name so I can follow up later on. Let me test that out, and I will get back to you.
Absolutely. Will do, Scott. Another question. We use WordPerfect. Does this automatically generate in Word only? If this supports WordPerfect, can it be programmed to open the form files in WordPerfect?
Yeah, absolutely. We're compatible with Word and WordPerfect. You definitely want to make sure you're on the latest version of WordPerfect, or at least, you know, I guess it doesn't have to be the latest, but you don't want to be on an old version because WordPerfect, some of the older versions, just the development was a little hinky. So just make sure you're on, a relatively updated version of WordPerfect. The latest version would be the best. But here's what you need to make sure, and this goes for everybody listening, not just, private cloud or local installs, okay? There is a user preference that you should check for each of your users for Abacus, okay? And the way you check it is by going to File, Setup, User Preferences, okay? In the User Preference window, there is a tab called Printing/Email. And then in that tab, there is a section on the right called Word Processor, okay? This is where you tell Abacus where your default word processor lives, okay? So for instance, you can see by my path here, mine is set to Microsoft Word. That's why it's going to the Windows Word, WinWord executable, okay? So if you're a WordPerfect user, you need to click that executable button right there, and you need to point the program to wherever your WordPerfect installation lives, okay? Now, I'll just tell you, it probably lives somewhere under your programs file in a folder called Corel, because Corel makes WordPerfect, okay? So you'd want to go in there somewhere, okay, and find that. If you are having trouble finding that, ask your computer person. I'm sure everybody has like a tech person they call or an IT person on staff. Just tell your tech person that you need to point the default word processor to their WordPerfect program. That way Abacus knows to always open WordPerfect when you run a form and not Microsoft Word, okay? And if your IT person has any issues with that, please contact our tech support team and they'll be able to walk them through it.
Great. Can you make the document forms protected as a read-only so others cannot change how company wants a form to look?
Yeah, so a lot of the court forms that you get come protected by default, and if you get any forms from us, there are some forms that are supposed to be protected, and you can't edit them. The only way to edit them is to actually clone the form, and then once you have it cloned, you can edit the clone. Let me see if I can find one. Actually, I won't waste time. Basically, some of them already come protected. Let's see if you can add that to a specific form. I don't know that you can do that directly within this window, but what you can do is adjust that in a user's security preferences. There is a setting inside of a user security preferences that you can turn off. Form editing, you can actually turn that off so that they can't do it. So let me do a little bit deeper research on whether or not you can do it on a form-by-form basis for the ones that aren't already, pre-protected, and I'll follow up with you. Anna, if you could just jot down that person's name as well so I know who to follow up with. I'll do a little deeper research on that.
Absolutely. And I think we have time for one more question. How do I change the word processor that forms link to?
Oh, good. So that goes back to that other question that we had a couple questions ago. The default is always going to be whatever you put in your user preferences, okay? So when you go into your user preferences and you go to that Printing/Email tab, make sure that you have your word processor executable set to the right program, whether it's Word or WordPerfect, okay? That's step one. Step two is really just making sure that when you are, creating these letters from scratch, making sure that you're creating them with the right file format. So like, in other words, Word docs always end in like .doc or .docx, whereas WordPerfect files usually end in like .wp or something like that. So if you have the right file extension on those forms to begin with, the system kind of figures that out, and it just uses whatever the default is. Now, with our APC clients, this is something you need to check, okay, if you are using WordPerfect, because I don't think WordPerfect comes in APC by default, okay? So if you need to have us put WordPerfect into your Abacus private cloud for you, because that's the processor you want to use, you need to let us know so we can get that in there for you.
All right, thank you so much, Scott. I know there are a few unanswered questions, but we're out of time, unfortunately, but we will make sure to download all questions from today's webinar and address them via email personally.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Don't forget to check our webinars page, okay, abacusnext.com. There is a little link in the top right corner of our webpage that says More. Click that More link, and you'll see webinars, okay, webinar schedule. Click in there, and you can see when all the upcoming webinars are. We do premium webinars on Wednesdays. Those are $99. It's a 1-hour session of an in-depth training topic. Okay, and then of course we always do the free training Fridays as well. Thanks for joining, everyone. We'll talk again soon.